Um, what's that one? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
It's a good one.
Try that one.
Me?
Yeah.
How much would woodchuck?
Ah, she's trying to be too fancy.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Okay, good.
I can say it slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the German one I taught you?
Absolutely not.
Are we streaming now?
We are streaming.
Fritz fischt frische Fische.
Fritz fished Fritze Fischer.
We got 3 out of 4 words.
Okay. Nice. All right. So we ready to rock and roll here?
I think so. If we're all set up, I'm ready.
Okay. I guess I can share this on my, if you want to share it on your.
I don't have my device.
Oh. All right.
I'm underprepared. But that is kind of my life lately.
Okay. Oh. How do I just share it?
You have to change the little doodad.
Oh. Share now. Okay. And can I share it to you?
I don't think so, unless you log in as me.
I'm going to share it on your timeline.
Oh, okay. I guess you can.
Boom.
Lucas, pulling all the weight for me.
That's all right. You need to make my ramblings seem coherent and meaningful during the conversation. So
I'll try.
yeah, I'll do
no,
the
that
tech
didn't mean
support.
like it'll be hard. I just mean that's what I'm here for.
Don't worry, it'll be hard. All right, good. It looks like we've got some folks joining up.
Yay, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, welcome. If you want to join our Zoom call and join us for the workshop that we're going to be doing.
Otherwise, we won't be able to see you.
Yeah.
We'd love to see you.
Totally up to you. And it's just kind of like well, Carolyn, what are we going to be doing?
So for the next half hour, 45 minutes, we will be doing some Endless Beautiful exercise, which means we'll be listening to our Endless Beautiful engine, our collection of sounds, and we will be doing something creative while we listen and have some fun and have a conversation about it.
Yeah. So quick check-in. How are things going? We're on April 1st, 2020. So what's new in your life? What's going on with you, Carolyn?
I'm doing okay. I'm fully online with school and work, and I think I did well on my herpetology exam this afternoon.
That's good.
So it was open notebook, so that made it easier. But yeah, I'm holding up okay, even amid all these kind of life changes with COVID. Not to say what must not be named or whatever, but I know we're all tired of hearing about it, but it's really shaping our lives.
Sure.
How are you doing, Lucas?
I'm doing pretty well. I go to an empty classroom Monday through Friday and create online classes for my students, which has been a challenge, but also really interesting and an opportunity for me to kind of test out like different procedures and things like that. I'm starting to definitely get into like a groove in terms of like materials that I see students are responding to.
So what's been interesting? What do you mean?
Well, it's just because of the nature of what's going on, everybody kind of has their own challenges at home, and that is true at all times. But right now, it's especially sensitive because kids are home from school. Maybe there are elderly parents that students are worried about. Maybe, somebody has to work. Maybe they work in a grocery store or something like that. I know that's the case for a few of my students. And just having a mix of, video conference stuff and making that as accessible as possible, but also asynchronous online learning. And it's really kind of um, been uh, a challenge and also interesting to see what works in terms of what is effective in with online instruction. I'm
Hmm.
kind of a nerd when it comes to this stuff.
Yes, he loves his instructional design, and
Yeah, so
I make fun
I'm a
of him
grad
for how much
student,
he tinkers with all his settings.
right, in the adult education program at URI, and this is stuff that I worry about all the time. But yeah, it's really, this is a live fire exercise here, and it's really interesting, and students are stepping up to this, and I wonder, for you and with your kids, or if you yourself are a student or whatever, it would be interesting to hear your stories about how things are going, because we're kind of having to figure this out
Yeah,
as we
please let
go.
us know. Comment on our stream here, email us. We're here for you too. We want to know what's going on in your life.
Yeah. So how do users access the Endless Beautiful engine, and how does this thing work here?
Good question. So, the best thing to do is to go to endlessbeautiful.com. And if you just scroll down a little bit, you will see our Endless Beautiful engine. All you have to do is hit the play button, and you will start to hear a random selection of these collected soundscapes. And there's a timer built in right there that you can use if you want to time yourself, do a 5-minute creativity exercise, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you have time for and want to do. It is totally at your discretion. You are in
Mhm.
control.
Yeah. This is meant to be accessed at any time, mobile, on your computer. You can use it to relax. You can use it to, as a creative spark. You can use it as just kind of like concentrated journaling time. Sometimes I'll listen to it and it's kind of like white noise in the background. And I just use it as kind of like a focus time to write.
And some really fun little gems can come out of your memory. I think
Mm,
that's one
yeah.
of the most exciting things that happens with the associations we bring to these sounds. I mean, you could think of it as just noise, but it's really not because you bring your experiences and interpretations to whatever you're hearing.
Hmm.
And I don't know, last week you had some really interesting memories
Yeah, we were talking
about
about roller
Skate
skating.
City.
Yeah, Skate City.
And I don't know, I'm excited to see what comes out today.
Me too. All right. So should we?
Any other questions before we get started on how to
What can?
react to the
Okay.
sounds?
Yes. What can users, listeners, people watching the stream or listening to the podcast, or if they go on our website, what can they do? What are some
Mm.
ways that they can respond to this thing when they hit play?
The true answer is whatever you want, but I recommend some kind of hands-on activity like writing or drawing a picture, or you could get out some paints if that's something that appeals to you. Just uh, a medium that feels like a way you like to express yourself. So it could even just be scribbling and or making a bullet point list. If you don't feel comfortable making something, with your hands, you could just uh, recollect and use your imagination.
Hmm.
But we encourage you to push yourself to use some kind of creative, expressive thing like writing or drawing or something else.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Okay. How long are we going to practice today?
What did we do last time? Did we do 5 minutes or did we do 7 minutes?
We did 7 minutes last time.
Okay.
And it went by quickly.
It did. I guess if it's all right with you, I would like to do 7 minutes again,
Okay.
if that works. Okay. So let me go ahead and get us switched over to the engine.
If you're not wearing headphones, you might hear some extra subtle dimensions in the sounds with headphones on, but whatever works for you is how this works best for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And away we go.
They're going to look back and they're going to see the 8 Tony flags, and they're going to know it's a broken mast. And that ship was originally Danish. This one was American. They would have spoken Danish. The people on this ship would have spoken English. So that was a way to talk between them when you didn't have the same language. Plus, if you can imagine.
So we're back.
We are back.
Okay, let me just get the camera back on us. Welcome if you're joining us for the live stream. All right. How'd that go?
A surprise, as always.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I just want to check in on our participants.
Mm-hmm.
If you would like, please, you can type it and send it to us, or send us a picture of what you created. We would love to hear from you and see what you created during this Endless Beautiful Creativity session. We're always curious how other people interpret these sounds and what effect it has on you. So you are also welcome to email us, create@endlessbeautiful.com. So I went first last time. Would you please read me what you wrote, Lucas?
Absolutely. These bugs are maddening. Where do they come from anyway? Somewhere in the wood. I pry the board, doing spot checks every spring before the daffodils come up and I don't see a damn thing. Then once we hit 50 degrees, my God, it's like a plague of locusts, except it's Japanese beetles. They look like ladybugs, but man, do they bite if they get riled up enough. I swear they're waiting for the right moment to catch me off guard. Wait until I've got my back turned and just swallow me up. I bet they would eat up my bones and all. You know, those surprise disappearances. They say some guy flew down to Costa Rica to escape his wife, and blammo, Japanese beetles. Anyway, I've got a plan this year. I knew they'd be coming. I've set up traps all along the house, toothpick trip flares, and plastic cups filled with ping pong balls and poison. You wanted a war, you little bastards? Well, now you've got one. I don't care if I have to nuke this whole damn house. I'll burn down the entire town. You got to make a stand when it comes to this kind of thing. That or the world will eat you up. It doesn't have to be bugs or lions or the nastiest thing you can think of. The world will rise up, right up out of the pavement and strike you down. And I'm going down fighting.
Whoa. I expected a war cry at the end of that. Tell me about what you heard and what you're thinking about and what all these references are.
Okay. So the initial sound was some sort of a spraying sound. And I think that might have reminded me of spraying some sort of pesticides or something. And I actually called my grandmother on my way home from work today. She's 96 years old.
96 today. Yeah. Today, April 1st,
April
2020.
1st. And she...
Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. And she told me about how they have these Japanese beetles. They kind of descend on the house every year. And I mean, they're just everywhere. They're just coming out of light fixtures and just caked on the walls. And yeah. And my nephews are terrified of them.
Aww.
And they have like a real distinctive smell to them as well. They really smell.
Are they stink bugs?
No, they're not stink bugs. They're
okay.
But when there are like millions,
still stinky. Yeah,
millions of them, it adds up. So I had that conversation. She's like, "Oh yeah, these damn bugs. You know, we're trying to get rid of them, this and that." And actually, another friend of mine, Tom, his birthday is also on April 1st.
Ah, happy birthday, Tom!
And Tom and I were roommates back in the day, which was also a Wednesday. And one of the things, I remember he kind of freaked out when there were like these Japanese beetles or whatever because he was allergic to them.
Oh no.
So he had an allergic reaction, and I didn't know. And you kind of reminded me today when we were talking about this conversation earlier that these bugs can bite, and I
Mm.
didn't realize
Our
that
native
was.
ladybugs don't, but the Japanese beetles can bite.
Yeah, so that was something that I was just not
Or
aware of.
Asian lady beetles. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I'm not sure what they are exactly.
Japanese beetles or something else.
They look very much like ladybugs, whatever these things are. I don't know. Maybe I'm calling them the wrong thing. Sorry, Japanese beetles.
Yeah, I'm not a bug person, but Japanese beetles I think have that glossy green back.
Oh no,
And I
this
think
isn't
these
those.
Asian lady beetles.
Okay, Asian lady beetles.
They look a lot like your
Yeah.
regular ladybug,
They look-
red with black spots.
Right.
And
They look just like it. So she's dealing with this, and this is just kind of like a thing that happens every year. And
somebody who knows about bugs, correct us.
and it's just kind of a mystery, at least to us anyway. It's like, where do all these things come from? Because I mean, they're nowhere, and then they're everywhere. And it's just kind of amazing.
I mean, it totally makes it understandable why people hundreds of years ago believed in spontaneous generation, because yeah, all of a sudden there's just hordes of these critters.
Right. Yeah, didn't they think that I mean, stuff was just like kind of created out of the mud and things like that? Like eels.
Yeah,
I think I listened to a radio lab about that.
I remember in one of my intro bio classes learning about kind of these old theories of how living things came to be. And I think there was a recipe for how to make bees. And it involved like straw, and there was a bull involved in some way. And it was like, because under those circumstances, like you would get native bees would just like, you could notice them coming out of the straw. So people were like, oh, well, this is the recipe for how bees come about.
Wow.
And, people were observant, and, that's probably a simplification. And like people have very sophisticated ancient ways of knowing things.
Sure.
But this whole idea of spontaneous generation, like that salamanders can come out of the coals of a fire, is a European folk tale, but is the opposite of what biologically salamanders can do.
Yeah.
Like
they don't. They're not Charmanders or whatever.
No, they need it to be wet and damp. So maybe out of like an old fire pit.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so you've got millions of beetles coming out.
Okay, so millions of beetles, and then we got to a sound where there was just kind of like this frantic shuffling of something, and like frantic, like I don't know, it sounded like to me like creating something frantically and like throwing it into a pile. So I just imagine this character prepping for the beetle, the war with the Beatles. And like setting up
traps,
right, all these like kind of crazy booby traps, and really, he's just kind of drawn a line where he's like, okay, this is my last stand or whatever against these Beatles. So yeah, I mean, it sounds a little.
It feels like you've peppered in some other things that have. Well, I don't know. You mentioned like lions and tigers. What's that about?
So that's definitely the what is it? The Lion King?
Lion King?
Or not the Lion King. What's the Tiger King, right?
Oh. Okay, I've watched one episode of Tiger King. Lucas is a bit further in than me. It's bananas.
So
how has this infiltrated your subconscious?
I mean, because I think that's the great thing about it is there's just this really kind of batty character, Joe Exotic, and
this is a Netflix documentary,
right? A Netflix documentary, and everybody else around him is also extremely eccentric, and they kind of
mildly,
right? They all have like these guns and whatnot, and there's this kind of this paranoia That's always kind of
Very high drama, like
right. And maybe
crazy
some of that's
situations.
earned, some of it isn't, whatever. So yeah, maybe that would kind of went in there. And it's, the same reason why it's fun to watch that is fun to kind of write about this. And it's like, okay, yeah, this guy's, going kind of nuts with this thing and kind of these ridiculous countermeasures or whatever, and theories as to like the hive mind of these beetles.
Well, I think it's a really interesting thing, like especially the way we think about pests.
Mm-hmm.
Like that there is this adversarial attitude of like I guess with anything, with mice or roaches or fleas or whatever you have that's like encroaching on your home, like your territory.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a conversation with the director of the Rhode Island Natural History Survey years ago now, talking about why people are so obsessed in America with mowing our lawns and like having these beautiful sculpted yards. And his idea was that the edge of your yard, like the edge of where you mow, is like the edge of your domain. And like it is the area with which like you exert your control. And the rest is still, even though like we've domesticated a lot of the landscape, it is still like the wild beyond your border.
Right.
And if the mice come into your house, like they're invaders, like, and we do wage war on them, like chemical war
Mm-hmm.
with all the bugs and the rodents and whatever.
Yeah, I mean that makes complete sense to me.
Oh yeah, I was a very smart person.
Right. Who's that? David Gregg?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast. He was one of our first podcast guests, actually.
Oh yeah, I don't remember the episode number, but he was very supportive early on. He's a
Trailer was
wow.
the...
You have a great memory for these things.
Hey, man. All right, so let's hear what you've got.
Okay. They're gonna know in hindsight how reluctant I felt, how uncertain, how fervently I wanted to be right, and yet curled in deliberate quiet. How comfortable the closed mouth, how much I strained, how much I slept. I remember, childlike, misunderstanding. How could it be possible that God was always watching, always knew? How could God live in my heart and I know so little, have so much to learn? Knowledge, knowing like a can kicked down the road and drifting into the gutter. I like the word gutter, but my childhood had none, just a ditch where the grass grew extra green and thick with wetness. The largest snapping turtle I ever saw laid her eggs at that ditch's sandy shoulder. How much she must have known. Godlike in her own right, digging her nest with hind legs in hindsight.
Now, the beginning part, and it kind of has this thread that goes through it in terms of God and so are we talking about God in a spiritual sense?
I used capital G on one line and then two little G's in other places.
Okay.
So I guess I'm not sure.
Okay.
I mean,
that's
yes,
fine.
I guess in a definitely in a spiritual context, but in like the traditional biblical capital God, maybe not explicitly.
Okay. Now there are kind of questions or whatever at the beginning that you're having, and you're trying to figure these things out. Now, is this a kind of based on some feelings that you had when you were a kid, or?
I think it's a mix. I think I've got kind of this simmering feeling lately related to all the uncertainty about our current healthcare crisis, and that's just like really uncomfortable. And I think it's something we're feeling as a a nation and like as a global like humanity, like we're all feeling this uncertainty of like, here's a thing we don't have the answers on. And in some of my classes, we've been talking about how this information is changing so rapidly of what we do know or what we think we know, and how easy it is to have misinformation and how that can be really harmful. So I think a lot of what I wrote down here is coming out of that feeling of uncertainty about like, how do we best handle this situation? Like, how do I take care of myself? How do I help care for you? And like, you know, everyone else that we love and care about. And I guess that has I'm struggling to think of the right word, but I think it makes me feel some of the same feelings I felt as a kid when you just know so much less about the world in general.
Okay.
So it kind of feels like, it's hard to articulate. Like, you remember those moments in the classroom where the teacher has asked you a question and you have like a vague glimpse of the answer in your mind, and you know that the teacher knows the answer and you want to like look into their mind and figure it out, but you can't because you've just never done it or you've never known that information before. And I think right now that teacher doesn't exist. So like we're all just grasping at something none of us understand. And most of us understand it very poorly.
Sure.
So I guess that's what I was getting at. And I think the piece about God is more some of that paradox I remember in some ways enjoying, but also being very confused about it, where like, okay, so the God that I'm being raised to believe in is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving, but like, how can that be possible? And also, if like God is everything and we are all in God and like that's where we're supposed to be, like why don't we know the things God knows? And I remember just liking trying to think about those things as a kid, and it, I would ask my parents about it and they'd be like, well, that's part of faith, is just like the not knowing and just being in that not knowing. And I never liked that. I wanted to know. Maybe it's just my personality. Like I really like knowing things.
Sure. Now, you had kind of this wonderful moment with the turtle and the eggs in the tall grass. Now, how does that connect to these other ideas of God and not knowing and faith?
Well, a lot of people might think this is sacrilegious, but I think there is, or maybe some background. I spent a semester in Bhutan, and in Bhutan, the dominant, or the faith that most people practice is called Vajrayana Buddhism, and in that belief system, there's a pretty strict hierarchy about sentient beings. And animals are sentient beings, but they can't accumulate good karma the way that a human can. And I remember speaking to my professor and saying like, oh, like, okay, maybe in my next life I'll like be a stray dog and that'd be okay. And they were like, no, you should not aim for that. Like, that is wrong. And I wasn't agreeing with that. And I guess I like thinking about how animals experience the world. And it seems like they know what they're doing. And they we were talking about this the other day about how humans have something we call a theory of mind, in that we're aware of our own existence and the ways that we perceive our external world, and that's something that happens in a part of the brain that a lot of other animals do not have that anatomy. So it raises the question, like, then are most animals not self-aware of their existence? Like, they're just experiencing the world straight on. They're not thinking about that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways, I feel really grateful that I get to think about my experiences and the way I live in the world and my awareness of myself. But I think there's an immediacy of that animal experience that I wish I understood. And I think being a biologist and getting to observe those animals have their experiences is like the closest I can get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a godlikeness in that experience, that they are immediately connected to their world without thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
I can certainly see the...
Maybe you can explain the whole theory of mind thing a bit better.
Well, we've read an article that was really talking about how just the definition of what the mind was has been expanded in some circles, or there was a theory about this where when we think of perhaps the mind, we might just think of what is going on in here. Or we are, and when I say here, I mean my head. I'm sorry.
In your brain.
Right, in your brain. Sorry for podcast listeners. And this article suggested that, of course, we're learning a lot about like our microbiome and in our bodies. So that's kind
that
of...
when you have a gut feeling, like
Sure.
that is an idea.
Mm-hmm. And that has expanded over the past decade or whatever. But they were saying that even beyond that, that things outside of our body, in our environment, is actually can be considered part of your mind. And, how you interact with the world can be something. So perhaps, you give somebody a hug. Maybe when we're thinking about just inside of the brain or whatever, we can think about maybe taking some type of medicine or something like that. Whereas these are actions and decisions and ways that you're interacting with the world. So just kind of a holistic way of kind of bringing all of this together. And it was an interesting article. And, the more I thought about it, I was like, well, it just kind of just expands a little how the parameters in which I see this, which I think can be helpful. I don't think it necessarily changed how I thought things necessarily interacted with one another, but just kind of broadened the scope of the influence and what that can be categorized as. I think maybe I had compartmentalize certain things, like, okay, well, this belongs to that group and that belongs to that group, and this kind of brings that all together, which I thought was helpful and interesting. And
yeah, well, I think we have a tendency to use brain and mind as synonyms, and I guess one of the main takeaways I got from that article is that the mind is not limited to the organ of the brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And as far as the animals go, I mean, I think that, at least for me, that's always kind of fascinating to watch animals. And even we have our cat, we have a house cat, and it's fun. Like, she has personality and different things that she's doing, and different ways that she's reacting with the world. But also you can take a laser and, run it around and she'll just totally forget what she's doing and start chasing after that laser. And there's and every once in a while, she'll be walking through the apartment and then suddenly she'll just like leap up and start galloping around. And, it's like, what?
The zoomies.
What brought that on? Like, do you, in your mind, are you thinking like, for me, if I'm I'm looking at the computer screen, maybe I'm working on some schoolwork or some other project or something. I'm like, man, I got to take a break. I'm starting to get, or these words are just starting
Antsy.
to blend together, right? So I got to do something. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to play a game or whatever. Is our cat doing that? Like, man, I'm starting to get a little wound up, tight. I gotta
I think it's
leap
funny
around.
that's your like internal voice of what like our little cat sounds
So
like.
she's a blues singer.
Some like gravelly old smoker.
Hey, she's 10 years old.
Yes, that's true.
So, or is it just like something kicks in the mind where it's like, okay, you need to keep your senses sharp. Go do this. Like, and it's it's almost as natural as breathing air is, or our, other natural processes that we have. And that's always
suggesting
fascinating.
that she's not thinking. Like,
Sure.
she's definitely thinking.
Right.
And I think more animals than we give them credit for it do a lot of complex decision making and interpretations of their surroundings and, how to survive. And I guess one of the big lessons for me is that if we consider like the depth of their experiences, like animals cannot be commodities. And like I'm saying this as someone who is like, I am not a vegan, like I'm pro hunting, I'm fine with eating meat, like animals and people, like we exist in that way that, well, I don't know, I don't want to get into all of that, but it's complicated, and animals have really rich lives that I think are fascinating, and we do ourselves a disservice when we simplify their experiences.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Makes
guess
sense
that's
to
one of the
me.
big lessons for me.
Yeah. Well, once again,
Including the Beetles.
oh,
Those lady Beetles.
Man.
I'm not saying you can't have your war. I'm just saying that your adversary also experiences the world.
Sure. Well, we never know what we're going to get into whenever we do one of these Endless Beautiful workshops, and this one certainly did not disappoint.
I agree.
So I need to have a title for the podcast when I release this. What are 3 main takeaways from this?
Oh my gosh. Like 3 words?
3 words. That's our title.
Beetles, turtles, God.
Boom. All right.
Okay.
I think that's good.
Send us what you made.
Yeah.
We want to see it.
And we're going to keep up with these online things. Wednesdays, go to our Facebook. That's probably the best way. We'll put up a post. We have an Endless Beautiful Creators Facebook group on there if you want to join that. You can join the Zoom call if you want. And we're trying to adapt to kind of the changing circumstances here. And yeah, I hope you're doing well. And I hope this finds you well. And we will talk to you soon. So my name is Lucas Prawley.
I'm Carolyn Decker.
And this is Endless Beautiful.
Happy birthday, Bev.
And Tom.
And Tom. How old is Tom?
Tom's probably 36.
Okay.
Or maybe he's 37. He might be a year older than I am.